Okay, in the Mishnah we had a machlekes between the Bisham and Basil. Can you put in dioi to be nishra from Erev Shabbos and it continues on to Shabbos? So the Gemara makes from this a diik, the Chmashma, that on Shabbos itself, everybody will be moided that putting in the water into the dioi will be a chiyuv derais. Frag the Gemara, beginning at the Gemara Daf Yud Ches, man tanan nesinas mayim l'dioi zuhi shriyasa. Who is the Tana who says that it's a chiyuv derais just to add water to the dioi, and that puts the dioi, the dioi is samamona, which is like grains, and it puts together, it glues them together, makes them stick together. Who says that this by itself is a chiyuv derais? It's already called gibel. That's called zuhi shriyasa. Amar Rav Yosef said, Rabbi, that's Rabbi. Tanya Mama Geled, Echad Neusnes HaKemach ve'Echad Neusnes HaMayim, is Achrin is Chayev, Divrei Rebbe. So we see Nesinas HaMayim itself is already a Chayev Chatas. And Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda Omer, Rav Yosef Omer, which is the Girsas of Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda Omer, Ein Chayev Achi Yegab. One is not Chayev till you do Gibel. So you see from this Gemara, Shittas of Rav Yosef is that this mission is Rebbe, which means he includes Efer in the same halacha as Kemach, exactly the same, which means together with his Chumras and together with his Kulas. How do I see that? I see that he says that according to Rav Yosef and Rav Yehuda, you're going to be Potter. The Mishnah cannot be Rav Yosef and Rav Yehuda. You're going to be Potter. Fine, that makes sense. But on the same time, the same Braisa Zokta Chaychet, Ein Chayev at Sheyigabel is mashma, but once you're going to be Megabel, you're going to be Chayev even on Efer. Is mashma from Rabbi Yosef that even something which is Lav Bar Gibel has exactly the same halacha as Bar Gibel. Then both is the machlokes. Rabbi holds in the Nesinas HaMayim is already Chayev, and Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not. But Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda is made that once you're Megabel, you are Chayev. Let's further stretch this, and we'll see how from the Gemara it comes out further like that. Abaye told Rabbi Yosef, V'dilmano, Atkan lo yikamer Rabbi Yosef ela bekemach, the bar gibelu, and therefore Rabbi is the one who's, and only Rabbi says Chai, but Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Yehuda says putting in water is potter. Avol diyoy de lav bar gibelu. Eima, let us say it's worse. L'chayev, let it be worse. Let him be chayev, even adding water, because he can't do gibel anyway. It's not bar gibel, so just the sticking them together is the job. You don't make an isa out of it. Just the stickiness is the gibel, and putting the water makes the stickiness. And therefore, you should be chayev according to Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Yehuda as well. Emfer to Rabbi Yosef, lo yisal kedaitach. I wouldn't think that way. Why? The Tanya have a second Braisa. Second Braisa. Echad Neusnes HaEfer. Ve'echad Neusnes HaMayim. U'achrin is Chayev Divrei Rebbe. So we're talking clearly about Efer, not about Kemach. And still exactly the same halacha. As well as Echad Neusnes HaMayim is Achrin Chayev Divrei Rebbe. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, At Sheyegabel. A klare Braisa that even by Efer, if you're going to be, you're not going to be Chayev, but if you're going to be Megabel, you're going to be Mechayev. Of them, sagt Abayet, Enfert Abayet Tzadik, V'dilma Maya Efer, what is Efer? Offer. The Bar Gibelu, offer is the one you make tit, not Choil. Choil, the Rambam says, is sand. Sand never sticks together. Sand always remains, it becomes wet, but it doesn't stick. You can't build from it. You can't make a mud. That's choil. That's lav bar gibel. But offer is bar gibel. It means offer the bar gibelu. Of them fragt Rabbi Yosef Tzadik v'tanya efer v'tanya offer. We have two braises. So one must be efer. Again, what do you see from Rabbi Yosef? Efer, offer, kemach, all the same halacha. Emfer, the Gemara says Abaya Emfer, midig abada the Tanya. If this would be one Baraisa, one after the other, then you could see one is Efer, one is Offer. Since they're two separate Baraisas, one that B'chia learned, one that B'shia learned, And maybe one says correctly the word offer, the other one is a mistake. It says Efer, but it also means offer. If they're together, you can't say that. Why do you repeat twice? So the bottom line is that the Gemara somehow Abaya haltzich bazayin, that Efer would be worse than offer. In worse than Kemach. In which sense? That Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda will be made that the Sinas Hamayim will be an Isser Deraisa and Efer. Mashen can offer Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda is Chaylik. As opposed to Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Yosef kept on claiming that what? That Efer is the same as Kemach, as offer, as everything. Now, let's learn Tosfos. Aval diyoy, the lava gibel. Sagt Tosfos, what am bememed lik kalashmanim yafel diyoy. Frag the Gemara boil, who? What is it good for? Like gabel or laashe? Zet me that you could be a gabel diyoy. It is bar gibel. Why are you telling me it's lav bar gibel like Efer? So Tosfos lav dafke gibel. Halacha gibel, when the Gemara says gibel, haine iruv bialba. The Gemara meant to ask, is it good for mixing or is it good to make a smoke? Okay, finish. Now starts the Iker Sugi. Im time fragt is wo mors the Omer Perig Basra and Daf Kuf Nun Hey, the Lavar Gibel who the Gemara says the same, very similar story. The Gemara says Amachleikis, Morson. One mandomer says you could mix it, one mandomer says you can't. Frag the Gemara, you know what? Hold on just 1 second. Let me put inside the Lashon Gemara exactly. Of Daf Kuf Nun Hey. Just a short stick of the Gemara, so I'm not going to switch the screen. The Gemara says, it's Daf Kuf Nun Hey on the base at the bottom. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya. No, not this Gemara. Yeah. The Gemara says, the Tanya Behedye, Ein nois nemaim lemoisen, divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Oimer, nois nemaim lemoisen. So we see clearly, before that, the Gemara says, okay, Omer Abai, Amrite Kama de Marmes Nissen, Mani, our Mishnah, the Mishnah, which the Mishnah talks about putting water into Moisen. So Abai says, I said this halacha before Mar, and he told me, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, only Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda is matter to put the water in Moisen. The Tanya Echet Nissen Sakem Echet Nissen L'Teichamayim Mo'ach Nechayev Divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Nechayev At She Yigabe. So frag the Gemara did the Zelbe Kasha. So again, the Gemara said Moisen. We have a machlekes. The Mishnah says you're allowed to add water to Moisen. So the Gemara, it's only according to Rebbe, according to Rabbi Yosef. But Rabbi Yehuda, it's also a carbon copy of our Gemara instead of Efer, instead of Dioi. It's talking about Moisen. Zog the Gemara does Elbakasha Dilma at Kanli Kamer Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda that's Mutter Hasam Elekema the Bar Gibelu Aval Morsen the Lav Bar Gibelu I feel Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Moida Zog the Gemara can't be Loisal Kedaitach because we have a Beferish Brais that says the Tanya Behedya Ein Nois Tamaim LeMorsen Divrei Rebbe Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Ein Nois Tamaim LeMorsen. Over there you cannot make a Greis. You cannot say Moisen means offer. Efer, you could play with the words. Say Efer didn't mean Efer, Efer meant offer. Yeah? So what do you see from the Gemara and Daf Kuf Nun Hey? A klare Gemara, that the Gemara comes to a miskana, that it's not true. That Efer, that Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is matter to put water into Marsa. And even though it's Lav Bar Gibel, the Gemara called it Lav Bar Gibel, nevertheless, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is matter. And over here, Abaya and Rabbi Yosef are both not fitting that Gemara. That's what's missing in the Friedrich Yeshirim. We never got to this part yet, but this will be the Prima Gadol and so on. And not only Abaya is totally against that Gemara. Because Abaye comes to a miskana that Efer is worse, and you're not allowed to put water in there. And Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda says in that sugya that you could put water in Marsa. Yeah? And Rabbi Yosef is also chaylik. Why? Because Rabbi Yosef brings a brayse, and the Gemara over here brings a brayse, that it says, Eino chayev at sheyigabel, which means that you're not chayev at sheyigabel. So let's explain how this is a stira. If we learned Rif, Rosh, Rambam, the way we learned Shulchan Aruch, the way the Maggid Mishnah explains the Gemara Daf Kuf Nun Hey, why can you put water in Marsa? The Maggid Mishnah says it very clearly. Because stamazo in kemach to put water, according to Rebbe's of the Raisa, according to Rabbi Yosef of the Rabbana, but it's still awesome. But if it becomes lav bar gibel, then it's bechlal not the Raisa even to mix. Then we're mekel. Then the sinus amayim becomes muter lekitchila. The mixing is at the Rabbana. We're matter with the shinui, and that's why we matter the Marsa. So it's clear from Rif Rosh Rambam that we're not learning like Daf Yud Ches. Why? In Daf Yud Ches we learn by Efer Einei Chayev At Sheyigabel, that even according to Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda, Kemach, Efer, offer all the same. Nisinas Amayim is not Chayev. Gibel is a Deraisa. Rif Rosh Rambam learning the way the Maggid Mishnah explains them, that Gibel by Lav bar Gibel is not a deraisa. That's why Marson is Lav bar Gibel. That's why the mixing is mutter with the shinui. The nesinas hamayim is mutter lekitchila. You don't even need the shinui. So these two gemaras. So the way the Beis Yosef said, the way the Machzah Shekel brought it down. Machzah Shekel said, simple. We don't pass like Daf Yud Ches. We pass neither like Rabbi Yosef nor like Abaye. That this gemara is out. We're never on like the Gemara in Daf Kuf Nun Hey, and the reason why Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda's matter over there in the Sinas Hamayim, it should have been also with the Rabbana. The teretz is because it's Lav bar Gibel. Not only is it not equal, it's even better than bar Gibel, and therefore the Gibel itself is mutter mit hashinui, and the Sinas Hamayim is mutter lekitchila without a problem. But our brayser, so they told us, don't bring in Daf Yud Ches. Daf Yud Ches is a brayser. We don't know about such a brayser. This Gemara doesn't exist. However, Tosfos doesn't go that way. Tosfos wants to reconcile Daf Yud Ches or Daf Kuf Nun Hey. We're going to need to reconcile it Bein La Abaye and Bein La Rabbi Yosef. And this is the knech that the Pri Megadim brings into the sugya, which the Machzah Shekel didn't talk about it, the Tosfos Shabbos didn't talk about it, and mit dem verempfete the ganze Beis Yosef. We'll see. Let's look into Tosfos. Sagt Tosfos, Vim Toim, I have a steer to our Gemara, and our Gemara Abaye finished off. The Skonis like Gemara Abaye finished off the Diyoi, which is Lav bar Gibel, is worse. Worse in two ways. You can't mix it, and adding water. Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda is more adding water is a deraisa. Fragt Tosfos, the Gemara sagt in Peri Basra the Lav bar Gibel. And we come and Hasam Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda Einei Chayev At Sheyigabel. It's interesting. Over there, I don't think it says the word Einei Chayev At Sheyigabel. Over there, it says the word. The words over there is the Tanya Behedya Ein Nois Tamayim LeMoisa Divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda and Nois Tamayim LeMoisa. It doesn't say over there the lashon Einei Chayev At Sheyigabel. It says Nois Tamayim LeMoisa. So that's the kash. So how can you learn as was? As Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda over here says mutar nitamayim. It could be Tosfos had a girsa that it says also Einei Chayev At Sheyigabel. B'meila, that's totally against our sugya. V'yesh leimer the hasam legabe kemach kamer de'einei bar Gibel. Only relative to kemach, avar bar Gibel hu tefei mit yoy. It's more bar Gibel more than the yoy. Well, halacha lemaisa ben halacha yoy doesn't bring in anything from the yoy. So what is Tosfos teretz? I'm going to say the teretz according to Abaye. Why according to Abaye? Says the Gemara, you're allowed to put water into Marson when it's Lav bar Gibel. But our Gemara, we said Lav bar Gibel is worse. Even the Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda answers. How can you be matter over there to put water in Marson? The teretz is It's a play on words. That's lav dafke, lav bar gibel. The Gemara called it lav bar gibel, but it's only relative to kemach. Really, it's bar gibel. If you learn that way, so let's come to psak halacha. Also, let me finish off in Tosfos first. Tosfos says, and that's why he disagrees with the Gemara in Beya. The Gemara says, kitum ishara. So Rashi learns you could put water into Efer on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, and make from this a little dough to cover the oven. Yeah? Why? Because Efer is lav bar gibel. His mashma, Rashi goes like daf kuf nun hey. There's such a concept of lav bar gibel, like Marson, which is less. It's no deraises. The gibel is not a deraisa. The sinas hamayim is not a deraisa. So Yom Tov they were matter it. So there's no such thing. I don't have such a Gemara. In Daf Yud Ches and in Daf Kuf Nun Hey, we say Atshe Yigabel. You know, and that was lav dafke, lav bar gibel. That was really bar gibel. But if it's really taka lav bar gibel, there's no stira from Yud Ches to Kuf Nun Hey. When it's really lav bar gibel like Efer, the gibel is also, the sinas hamayim is also, everything. It's worse. Yeah. And that's why Tosfos says you cannot put water in Efer and Yom Tov, you can only put water in Erev Yom Tov. But, so according to Tosfos, how are we going to teach the Gemara now? Nois the Maim Lamarson on Erev Shabbos, and then the Gemara says you're allowed to do with the Shini. You go only Shesi ve'Erev v'Shas you mix. You don't go around and around. You only go Shesi ve'Erev. Yeah? So how does that work? So Tosfos, because really it's Bar Gibel. But then we lost the Maggid Mishnah. The whole beer of Rif Rosh and Rambam according to Maggid Mishnah was, what's the heter of Marson? Because it's lav bar gibel. It's not a deraisa. So the gibel itself is mutter b'tashinu. Sinas hamayim is mutter because it's not a deraisa b'chlal. But according to Tosfos, the Tosfos calls it is bar gibel. Because lav bar gibel, nothing would work. It's bar gibel. It will be worse. It will be worse. It wouldn't be matter b'tashinu. Nothing. It's bar gibel. So therefore, the Nesinas Hamayim is not a problem according to the Yosef Rebbe Yehuda. But Nesinas Hamayim, you can't have a shini. So the Nesinas Hamayim is not a problem because it is Bar Gibel. And the Gibel, what's the heter? It's a Bar Gibel, it's a deraisa. What's the problem? Muzma learn not like the Maggid Mishnah. Tosfos learns that Chazal were mater deraisa when it's a tzorech. The tzorech hayom. They're matter tarnegolim. I'm sorry, they're matter to make cereals that people need, or you need for the behemoths marson, you need to have marson for the behemoths. And b'meila marson and kemach have exactly the same halacha. They're both deraisa, they're both bar gibel. There is no deraisa according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda and Sinas Hamayim, but when it's a necessity. It's not mutter, but it's not a deraisa, but it's not mutter than the sinas hamayim according to the Yosef Bar Yehuda. If it's a necessity, the Chazal will matter it. And they were also mattered the same way the gibel itself, which is also a deraisa, they're also mattered through a shinu. That's shittas habes Yosef. That's what Tosfos is saying over here. That's Tosfos status that it's lav. That Marson is not a bar gibel. Kum de Beis Yosef. So the Beis Yosef, when he brings down this Tosfos, says something very interesting. Beis Yosef says that since Tosfos comes to a conclusion that Efer is lav bar gibel, so too we must say, since the Gemara calls Efer also lav bar gibel, so Marson must be lav bar gibel as well, according to Tosfos. Which Tosfos just said the opposite. Tosfos says clearly that Marson is bar gibel, but the Beis Yosef you can open the Shulchan Aruch and Shin Chav Dalet. Let's look at inside. Look inside Shin Chav Dalet. In Beis Yosef. So now Shulchan Aruch on page Tov Mem Zayin. Aber Toisus Kasu Perikama de Shabbos, Perikam maybe the other Rabba Mitte de Rabba give the Chayef Tvei. And the Chain Das Raiva Chehissig al Rambam was El Shainin. Yeah, Kim Dumani Shetor Bezeh against the Rambam Shesober Shenosel Maim Gam Shein Chayef Shemlisha Bezeh Shibush Godlu. So the Amru Eifel Rabba Gibelu El Shainin Mechusser Gibel. Even the sins of Maim Levad is a Chayef, it's worse. Because of Rabba Magidolov, it's very important this. Ikedaito Dais Dasu Achreinim. The Rabbi Magid and the Magavram brings it down that what? That Shittus HaToisus is Dasu Achreinim, not Pshat Rifrash Rambam. Okay, that prat. Sagt weiter the B'Sheis, V'af api shlo iskira HaToisus be'ef, shlo iskira HaToisus v'raivet ele eif, the B'Sheis of Taina, the Toisus didn't speak about eif, and only about eif. Nira, the hu adin lemarsen. Toisus clearly spoke about Marson, and he said it's Bar Gibel. And he says, the bad Yamru Perik Mishach the Marson la Bar Gibelu, Kederich Shamru Be'efer, Oy Bazoi, Bekiven de Lefi Devreim Gibel Marson Mitzel mit der Reise, Muslimen sagen, Time der Rebbe Rebbe Yehuda, like I just told you, the Shara little Maim al Gabe Marson lav mit Time Shekos Avarava Mak. Ooh. Ele Mishem de Kiv, and the Menasinis Maim, Loi Mechaim, Rebbe Yosef Rebbe Yehuda, Alpha Pisha Chachamim Gazel, all of Kedamashma. Because it says me diktoni, Perik Mishach Rebbe Yosef Rebbe Yehuda, Merene Chayev, Achi Gabel, the Almazet, with the Chiyuvelet. Aval is Sirami Ika, like the Avamagit says, it's Hanamila only bekemech because there's no Tzedich Leyonim. Aval Marsan, Sheyesh B'Tzedich Hayim, Lahacham Lachaim, Lev Loi Gazel. So what did the B'Shesuf say? One way he said as was, that Marson is Bar Gibel. But really, the Svara what the Beis Yosef says is not so much off from what Tosus was saying. Because what did we say Tosus said? Tosus really said Marson is Lav Bar is Bar Gibel. And because it's Bar Gibel, Yosef Rebbe Yehuda says you could put water. Because Lav Bar Gibel is worse, you can't put water. Yeah? But the bottom line is, according to Tosus, why is it mutter? It's a deraisa. Yeah. Sof Kosof, Tosus calls it Bar Gibel, but Bar Gibel is for sure a deraisa. Yeah. Only the Rebbe Yehuda has the Nesinas Hamayim is not a deraisa. That's true. The Nesinas Hamayim is not a deraisa, but the Gibel is a deraisa. Why are you matter to do Shesi v'Erev? Muzmanach, according to Tosus, the swan of the Beis Yosef. That what? We're matter l'tzorech hayom. Says the Beis Yosef, they were only matter l'tzorech hayom by Marson, because that's necessary. By Kemach, they were not matter because it was not necessary. You know, Kemach, you have to make an Isa. And Isa needs to be cooked and baked. So what's the point of making an Isa Shabbos? That's the Beis Yosef's mahalach. Yeah. Kum the Tosus Shabbos. In fact, Marafsan Igra. It's against the Tosus. Tosus says clearly it is Bar Gibel. The Beis Yosef says it's Lav Bar Gibel. Kum the Prima God. And he says, let's take this Gemara and divide this Gemara into Abaya and into Rebbe Yosef. According to Abaya, Abaya said, Sai Rebbe Yosef Rebbe Yehuda, Sai Rebbe is made that Efer is worse. I'm sorry. Rebbe Yosef Rebbe Yehuda is made that Efer is worse than Kemach. Nesinas Hamayim becomes an Isser. That's how Abaya learns an hour Gemara. Then why are you allowed to put water into Marsa? And for Tosus and Chanama, it's Bar Gibel. That's why there's no deraisa on the Nesinas Hamayim. Yeah. So Tosus status according to Abaya is that whenever there's a deraisa on the Nesinas Hamayim, there's nothing is going to help. There's no shinu on the Nesinas Hamayim, and there's no heter for Tzorech Hayom because he can't make a shinu. So again, Abaya in our Gemara very clear. Abaya in our Gemara says clearly that Rebbe Yosef Rebbe Yehuda says that if it's Lav Bar Gibel like Efer, it's worse than Bar Gibel, and the Nesinas Hamayim becomes also. Once the Nesinas Hamayim becomes also Minatera, there is no heter Tzorech Hayom because you're going to need a shinu. You can't make a shinu in the Nesinas Hamayim. That's why Nesinas Hamayim. So Tosus has no breira. How are you going to answer Abaya? You're going to have to say, by Marson, we're allowing to put water. Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda is befedish allowing to put water. You're going to have to say, because Marson is bar gibel. It's bar gibel. And if it's bar gibel, so the Nesinas Hamayim is not a deraisa. In our Gemara is mashma, and it's a bar gibel. Once it's a bar gibel, it has a deraisa the gibel. If it's tzedek hayom, you can do it to shinu. So that's the shinu on the gibel. But if you now let's learn the deraisa like according to the Rabbi Yosef. What did the Rabbi Yosef say by us? And Rabbi Yosef said that Efer and Kemach is exactly the same. He brought a Braisa on Efer, he's going to Efer. But by both, Sai by Kemach, Sai by Efer, and so too, he says the same halacha would apply to Dioi. Einoi chayev ache yigabel. But until you're Megabel, the Sinas Hamayim is mutter. But it's also against Daf Kuf Nun Hey. Because it tells us, even according to Rabbi Yosef, which he says, Rabbi Yosef is always matter to put water. Fine. It's not never a deraisa to put water. That's true. That comes out according to Rabbi Yosef. That's the same as Kuf Nun Hey. But it says, Ein Chayev Ache Yigabel. So we see even by Efer, which is Lav Bar Gibel, if you're Megabel, you're Chayev. That's not like the Maggid Mishnah. It's not like Rif Rosh and Rambam. So even in the Rabbi Yosef, there's a chilik between Daf Yud Ches and Daf Kuf Nun Hey. It is like a matter to put water a little bit of Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. But the Gibel is Chayev. Even a Lav Bar Gibel, you're Chayev on the Gibel. It's worse. But Mela, the only teretz is going to be like the Rabbi Yosef said. That what? That we're matter at the Iraisa. We're matter at the Iraisa. Why we're matter at the Iraisa? Because it's necessary. Why? The heter of Efer is why? The heter, of Marson. According to the Yosef, you could learn it's Lav Bar Gibel. It makes no difference if it's Bar Gibel or Lav Bar Gibel. The Nesinas Hamayim is mutter anyway. Sinas Hamayim is no difference between Bar Gibel and Lav Bar Gibel. Because according to the Yosef, they're both equal. But he says, the Gibel itself will be a deraisa, so you can't say like Rif Rosh Rambam, like the Maggid Mishnah, that the heter of Shini is because it's a derabbanan. The heter of Shini is because it's tzedek hayom. It's like the Prima Godem is gewaldig the Bes Yosef. One of the Bes Yosef, when he says what he says, he goes a little bit of Yosef, not a little bit of Abaya. So he says the two Gemaras are the same. Marson, the Gemara calls Lav Bar Gibel. Marson is Lav Bar Gibel. Efer is Lav Bar Gibel. It's exactly the same. By both of them, there's no Chiyuv Deraisa to add water. It's an Issa D'Rabbanan to add water. Maybe. Yeah? It's an Issa D'Rabbanan to add water. But there's never a Deraisa to add water. The Gibel itself is a Deraisa. But by Kemach, they were not matter, it's not Tzedek Hayayim. And by Marson, it's a Tzedek for the behemoths, they were matter at Deraisa through a Shinu. And a Shinu could only be done by the Gibel. But in the Nesinas Hamayim, I don't need the Shinu, because by the Nesinas Hamayim, Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda holds that it's not a Deraisa. As opposed to Abaya, Tosis had to change. Because according to Abaya, the Nesinas Hamayim is a Deraisa B'Lav Bar Gibel. And you can't make a Shinui. So Lav Bar Gibel would be also Nesinas Hamayim. So Tosis has to say, according to Abaya, Marson is Bar Gibel. That's why the Isser is the Nesinas Hamayim is not a Deraisa. You could do it. The Enochanama, the Marson is the Gibel is a Deraisa, but the Tzedek Hayom, you can do a Shinui. That's how the Prima Godem says, "V'meila leisa lekushus ha toisus Shabbos." That's the Prima Godem barichas and Siman Shin Chav Dalet in the Prima Godem in Eshel Avram and Shin Chav Dalet Sif Kotan Aleph. The second half of Sif Kotan Aleph. That's how the Prima Godem is masber this shitta. So maybe we'll go inside through the Prima Godem, but what I want to do now is let's go back to the Alter Rebbe. I'm going to come back to the Alter Rebbe. And let's open the Alter Rebbe in Siman Shin Chavdal. So wait a second. So before we go to the Alter Rebbe inside, the Magen Avraham. So let's lay out the shittas as a kitzur in the shittas. Rif Rosh Rambam holds that Nesinas Hamayim never a Isra according to the Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, and that's how we pass. Never a deraisa according to the Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. That's how we pass. That's shittas. That's how shittas do for Rosh Rambam is we pass like the Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Nesinas Hamayim is never a deraisa. But something which is lav bar gibel, you go down 2 steps. Then the Nesinas Hamayim becomes mutar even with the Rabbanan, and the gibel itself becomes a Isser only with the Rabbanan. And by Mela, if you do a Shini, you're okay. That's shittas Rif Rosh Rambam. Sefer HaTruma goes totally opposite of Rif Rosh Rambam. He says clearly, you know what? It's totally opposite. We pass like Rebbe. If you pass like Rebbe, makes no difference now about gibel or lav bar gibel. Always, the Nesinas Hamayim is always Asr. Nothing is going to help. And the Nesinas Hamayim is no Shinu. If the Nesinas Hamayim is Asr, then for all cases, the Nesinas Hamayim Shabbos is Asr. Yeah? But, here comes an interesting Chiddush, which the Trumas Hadeshen said that we learned that inside in the Trumas Hadeshen. Trumas Hadeshen is Mechadesh. But the reason why, if you put water Erev Shabbos, why are you allowed to do the gibel on Shabbos? So he says, because it's lav bar gibel. Because it's lav bar gibel, it's only the Rabbanan. The gibel itself, because you did the water yesterday, I'm sorry, he doesn't say that so much. He's talking about lav bar gibel, he's talking by chardel and by other things. But he's saying, because you put the water yesterday, so it's already mixed with water. So the gibel is not going to be a doiraisa anymore. And because the gibel is not going to be a doiraisa, that's why you could continue on Shabbos. That's shittas sefer HaTruma. So it's totally against the Rif Rosh Rambam. The water you could never put in, no such a heter, because we pass like Rebbe, and according to Rebbe, always the Nesinas Hamayim is also and doiraisa. And the gibel itself, you could do a shinu by things which are not a doiraisa. And the water it has already from yesterday. So the gibel, it's lav bar gibel, you could do gibel. But Tosfos is a completely different mahalach over here. Tosfos has the Pri Megadim, Mashmi Paskins like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda as well. We don't pass like Rebbe. The whole shit is a Tosfos goes in Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. We pass like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. Nevertheless, the way the Pri Megadim now learns in Rabbi Yosef, shittas HaTosfos is that lav bar gibel is worse. The gibel itself is a deraisa. The Nesinas Hamayim is always mutter. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is always cholik. The Nesinas Hamayim is always not a deraisa. It's never a deraisa. So if it's a tzorich, you could add. And maybe even by kamach, if you need it for Tana Goylem, different than the Rabbi Yosef said, but if you need it for Tana Goylem, it's also a tzorich. When it's a tzorich, you can add, because it's never a deraisa. The gibel is always a deraisa. But nevertheless, if it's a tzorich, it's okay. So according to Tosfos, according to Rabbi Yosef, kum tois akula, that you're going to be able to do gibel. According to Rabbi Yosef, the gibel will be a deraisa. But nevertheless, if it's tzorich hayom, you could do it with a shinu, because in the gibel is shaykh a shinu. Nesinas Hamayim is never a problem. It's never a deraisa. It's only a derabbanan. There's a tzorich you can do Nesinas Hamayim and everything. But the Ravid Paskas like Tosfos, and the Maggid Mishnah adds that the Rov Achronim hold like Tosfos. So Nesinas Hamayim. So if you hold like Tosfos, what comes out? Nesinas Hamayim. The way the Pri Megadim learns, not like Abaya, like Tosfos, like Rabbi Yosef. So Nesinas Hamayim is never a deraisa, like the Gemara in the Afyut Ches, like it's shittas Rabbi Yosef. Nesinas Hamayim is never a deraisa, but lav bar gibel is worse. The gibel itself is a deraisa. It's a deraisa. Now, then it makes no difference between bar gibel and lav bar gibel, because if there's a tzorich, you could do it. If there's a tzorich, you could do it. Yeah. And b'meila kum tois. Okay. So now, based on this, let's go to the Alter Rebbe in Chavdalat Siv Gimel. Kvar nizbar b'simen shin chafal. Shahamorsun hu midvarim she'enam b'nei gibel. V'im gavloi b'Shabbos, yash oimrim, if you govel it on Shabbos, yash oimrim shepater ben atayr. Who is that yash oimrim? So that's the Rambam. Magid Mishnah Rifrosh Rambam. The first shit in Shulchan Aruch back in Shin Chafalef. That yash oimrim shepater ben atayr, because Eina b'nei gibel is better than b'nei gibel. Aber also mit the Sefer Ligvul Marson leBehema or Latani Goyim Kedarki Bechol. You need a shinu. Hello, this shinu. Chazal asked it. So you need a shinu. You're going to gablu me'at me'at. The heter of ma'at ma'at steht nicht by Marson, but the Gemara says it by Kemach Koli. The Magavraham says that Shum and Chardel of the same din. Marson has the same din as Kemach Koli. In Bemele, the same heter the Gemara said ma'at ma'at by Kemach Koli. We could use the same heter ma'at ma'at also by Mars. Commission is by Sham. Oi, second heter. Or you feel a harbe b'basachas. But I use another shinu. Elish lo yamaris biyadu achash anas na'mayim l'toichi kedarki b'chol. Can't do it like he mixes in the middle of the week. Elamavet b'tarvet, which is a cooking spoon or a makel or a stick. Shesi v'erev, and even many times, kamapama, feel a kamapama. Achi yisad of yafa. Shekivin she'enu amaris biyadu is not squeezing with his hand, and v'lo yisabav hatarvet yamakli doesn't go around with saviv kedarki b'chol the way you mix something. Elam aviru shesiver haray zeh shinu gamur umuter gam, and it's a shinu gamur. Umuter gam ken lenari mekeli el keli achi yisad of yafa till you give him misad of yafa. Umuter le'arav hamarsim b'derech zeh bekeli echad. And you're allowed to mix the marsim zebekele echad or fill a kuri kiraim. Okay, for the behemoths, even men for many behemoths. Fine. So that's the first shitta. Clearly, marsim is lav gibel. Clearly, it's a darabanan, and the shini works. But the divrei oimrim, now we have to pay very close attention, and let's see if I understand. The divrei oimrim sham gabel hamarsim is chayav min atayda. How would you teach? What does that mean? I would have learned that the Alter Rebbe means mamish, the Prima Godem, Shittas Abbas Yosef, and Rabbi Yosef. Not the Sefer HaTruma. Because it's Lav Bar Gibel. It becomes, the Gibel itself becomes a Deraisa. But here the Alter Rebbe says, let's look in the bottom, Chavhei and Chavav. Chavhei, he brings stam. There's no original Makoidis. It's only Heintig and Makoidis. They are based on Sif Tazayim, which is the Pashta Sefer HaTruma. Sefer HaTruma says, Sham Gabel Marson is Chayiv Min HaTeira. Where did the Sefer HaTruma say Sham Gabel Marson is Chayiv Ben Atayra if it has already water from yesterday? The Truma Sadeshan didn't say that. Truma Sadeshan said that you could do Marson if it has water from yesterday. You could do it with the shini because the gibel is not a deraisa. So we just said they can't add water. Yeah, gehen wir weiter da. Vafilo Sham Gabel Marson Chayiv Ben Atayra. Vafilo Ben Asinis Mayim Belvat Beloy Gibel is Chayiv Chavav. That's clearly what the Sefer HaTruma. So maybe we get a kvetcharein and we're going to touch like this. It doesn't mean the gibel itself. The lashon hafilu is a bit schwer. Vafilu ben nesinas mayim b'vat, not vafilu, only with the nesinas mayim. Why only with the nesinas mayim? Because if you pass like Rebbe, Sefer HaTruma, then therefore, what does Rebbe hold? Nesinas mayim is always chayev bein bar gibel bein eine bar gibel. But the Truma Sadeshan said clearly, if you had water from yesterday, from Erev Shabbos, why is a lot of shinui? Because all these things, chardlan, and all these things are lav bar gibel. When they have water already, he doesn't say those words. He says because it has water, the gibel is not isser anymore. Yeah, so the Mishnah Berurah teaches that. Don't tell me that ain't losh achar losh. That if you have an isa and you need it more, you're not chayiv. It says clearly in Yerushalmi, even rolling it out is chayiv. It makes the isa better. He says only there because it's lav bar gibel. That's what the Trumas Hadesha means. So come to choice even the Sefer HaTruma, which holds that we pascha like Rebbe is more machmed, but it's not like Tosfos. It's beferish not like Tosfos. Because the heter, why you're allowed by all the lav bar gibels to do the gibel itself with the shinui, zog the Trumas Hadesha al kapon pshat azoi. It's his pshat. Because once you have water in a lav bar gibel, a Mishnah Berurah, if it's lav bar gibel and you had water, then the gibel is not a deraisa anymore. Yeah, kumtois, interesting thing. So according to Sefer HaTruma, lav bar gibel is not more chomer than bar gibel. We pascha like Rebbe. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda is Meikel always. We pascha like Rebbe, they're all equal. Sinas Hamayim is always chayav. But lav bar gibel has a maila that if you put water from Erev Shabbos, on Shabbos you could do gibel because it's only the Rabbanon, and you could do a shinu. As opposed to Tosfos, a real lav bar gibel, the way the Pri Megadim learns Pshat and Rabbi Yosef, einay chayav be'efer atshe yigabel. Once you have a lav bar gibel, it's worse. You're chayiv even when it has water. When you megabel, you're chayiv. So the Alter Rebbe says that if I would learn that it's chayiv menatayra means on the gibel itself, that's shittas ateisus. That's not shittas hasefer hatruma, unless he holds like Abaya, not like the way the Pri Megadim learn, like Abaya learned, and according to Tosfos and Abaya, Marson is bar gibel. So Marson is bar gibel, chayiv menatayra. But then why is it? Clearly, that's only because we pass like Rebbe. That's not mitzad Tosfos, not mitzad Abaya, mitzad Rebbe. Kinesinas hamayim zeu gibura, which is Sefer HaTruma. Commotion is by Sham. Also litten mayim lemarsan b'Shabbos. Afili the al yidei shinu. Now here comes a bombshell. Ich kenne ich kamshat. Ella im nosen bo hamayim erev Shabbos. Oz azai. Ein begibuloi b'Shabbos isser min ha-Torah ela medivre soifrim. Why? You just started off to say l'divre yoimrim sh'hamagabel hamarsan is chayiv min ha-Torah. What does hamagabel hamarsan mean? What does hamagabel hamarsan mean? The pashtas, it means the kneading. And here he tells you, no, if it had water from Erev Shabbos, like the Trumas Hadesha. So Muchayre Muslim sagen that in the Reish, the beginning, when the Alter Rebbe says he didn't specifically mean the gibel. He meant the etzem concept of Mars. There is gibel by Mars, even though it's lav bar gibel. Even though it's lav bar gibel, there is a concept of gibel, like the Truma Sadeh, like the Sefer HaTruma. According to the Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, by Marson, there's no gibel, no isser. Like in Rosh Hashanah, no deraisa. But if you learn the Sefer HaTruma, we pass like Rebbe. In Bamela, there is gibel. But the word afilu is shver. Afilu ben the it's only the sinas hamayim, because he himself says clearly, the moment you had mayim from Erev Shabbos, you could add the water menatayr. There's no isser menatayr. Elam divre sefer. So even without knowing the pilpul, this needs a beer. Let's say somebody didn't listen to the Shia, never learned the Pri Megadim, never learned Tosfos, doesn't know the whole sugya. The Alter Rebbe needs a beer. He starts off Sham Gabel Amar Sechayim and Atayra Afilu Ben Sinas Hamayim is mashma that after you gave the water, the gibel is still a deraisa. Ham Gabel is Amar Chayev, also Afilu Ben Sinas Hamayim, but the gibel itself is a deraisa. And then he finishes off, no, if you put water from Erev Shabbos, once the water is there, the gibel itself is not a deraisa. So it's very interesting. So the only way I have a teretz right now, before looking in Achreinim, is that the afilu is lav dafke. And then kum tois azoi, that this is shittas, this is shittas sefer hatruma, Morson is lav bar gibel. The Magen Avraham says most achronim hold like Tosfos. It stems according to the Pri Megadim as well. According to Tosfos and Rabbi Yosef, Morson is lav bar gibel. Morson is lav bar gibel. And because Morson is lav bar gibel, therefore the Nesinas Hamayim is not worse, it's the Raisa, but the gibel itself is the Rabbana. So therefore, if you put water out of Shabbos, there's no gibel, and you can continue on Shabbos. Let's go back now for a moment to Shin Chav Aleph. We'll make it very bekitzer. Sif Tazayin and Shin Chav Aleph. Nalta Rebbe. Halosh, Avos Malachas, Veine Chav and Sinas Hamayim Otech Kemach Bavad, Ela Ache Yigabel, Kedar Kibachel, which is regular Kemach. Veine Am Gabel Chav, Ela Bidvarim Shebnei Gibel. Weiter, not Bepashto, this is not Shittas HaTosfos. Befeirish, you're not Chayev, only Bidvarim Shem Bnei Gibel. Like Rif, Rosh, and Rambam. Kigon Kemach, offer Letitchel Binyan. Aval Efer, V'choil Agas, Marson put together Efer, Choil Agas, and Marson, V'kemach Kali, Ukiyoytze Ben, Lavan Gibel. And therefore, like Shittas Rambam, Rosh, Rif, Rosh, Bam Gabel and Spotter, Avalas, Bivasei from Legabel Kemach Kali Harbe, Shema Yovel Legabel Kemach Sheni Kali, B'melevi is Chayev. I will put the Legabel Mahatma, they were Mater Mahatma, because it's a Shin with Derech. And even if it's Av or Kosher, you're allowed to, because you do it Shin. Av will Tvur Shleivi Shlish, that's a Shittas Rambam. In order to make Rach, I'm skipping that. If it's Shleivi Shlish, you can make Rach even harder. Fine. Zogt weiter der Alter Rebbe, v'yash cholkin al kol zeh. V'oimrim, she'ein chilik b'dvarim shem b'nei gibel l'dvarim shem b'nei gibel. What does that mean? She'ein chilik b'dvarim shem b'nei gibel l'dvarim shem b'nei gibel. So he teaches us. Ibekulat chayev in the sinas mayim levat. By all of them, you chayev only in the sinas hamayim, which means clearly like Sefer HaTruma and Trimas Hadesh. No. The sinas hamayim levat doesn't mean you chayev only by the sinas hamayim. Sinas hamayim levat means if you only gave mayim, you're also chayev. He's not discussing what's doing if you did gibel. He's not discussing that. He's saying that also, which is Sefer HaTruma, or Echad Mishar Mashkil Meipedes, Afa Bishal Gibel Klal, Kin Sinas Hamayim Zeh Gibula, Ele Imkin HaGibel Hurach, and then have the heter of Rach, She'azen Ken Lish, yeah? In Veinisim Div Sefer Tilut Zeh Shabbos HaShem Zbar, yeah? So the Shinush is Bar, Ben B'dvarim Shebnei Gibel, Ben B'dvarim, and was Akter, V'tiriu L'Tzorich Shabbos, if you made it Rach, Shaz ein kan lishe klal, ve'ein isura yela medivre seif. And v'tiriu l'tzorich Shabbos ayidei shinu. She is bad. Bein bedvarim she'ein b'nei gibel, bein bedvarim she'einam b'nei gibel. Lefichach, bein koli bein shtisa, also lost litam amashke b'Shabbos, afilu b'derech shinu b'choil, elim ken gibel rach. Why the Alter Rebbe throws in a naya word over here. Okay, but before we go to that, v'yash cholkim al kol zeh, she'oimim she'ein chilik ben dvarim she'en b'nei gibel l'dvarim she'en b'nei gibel, Reish Dalet. We asked this kasha already before. Reish Dalet, what does it say in the bottom? Earlier Mekaydes, Tosfos, Divrei Mas Chalavel, Raivet, Ramban, Rashba, yeah? And Magid Mishnah, b'shem Achrev, that's not really early already, yeah? So what does that mean? That this is how we pass him. So in other words, the Mara Mekaymes learn Pshat, and early Mara Mekaymes, learn Pshat and the Yash Cholkem HaKol Zeh, she'ein chilik ben dvarim she'en b'nei gibel, l'dvarim she'ein b'nei gibel, that's Shittas HaTosfos. That always, the gibel itself is always a deraisa, that's true. But that's not what the Alter Rebbe finishes off. Ubekulan chayev b'nesinas mayim b'lvad, that's Sefer HaTruma. Now we steht da weiter, and Reish Hey, Kerebe de Beraisa, Sefer HaTruma. So what does the Alter Rebbe want over here? So apparently he's trying to tell us like the Pri Megadim, that the Pri Megadim learns a new pshat in Tosfos, that is such a concept that Marson is lav b'nei gibel, Efer is lav b'nei gibel, and nevertheless there's a chiyuv that ice on the gibel itself, but nevertheless Still a machlokes Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda's matter the water, and Rabbi Asser's the water. Nor was then, if you get a pascha like Rebbe, if you pascha like Sefer HaTruma, it will become Asser, everything will be the same. Because if you pascha like Rebbe, the Sinas Hamayim is always Asser. So according to Sefer HaTruma, if you go together with Tosfos, there's no chilik between Bnei Gibel and Lav Bnei Gibel. Water is always mutter. I'm sorry, we're always also because we pascha like Rebbe. And the shinui is always mutter, like Tosfos mitzad, not mitzad, this is the Rabbanan. The shinui is always mutter mitzad because it's l'tzorech hayom. That's why it's mutter. In the Chayre, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. Ve'ein isuru v'hitiru l'tzorech Shabbos al the shinui shizbar bein bedvarim she'en b'nei gibel bein bedvarim she'en b'nei gibel is mashma. Afile b'nei gibel mamash afile regel lekemach. I fit nicht so. He says lefichach bein koli bein shtisa is also litaman al mashke. Elohim ken gibel rach, but it doesn't say regel lekemach is also mutter. Lefi swara rishoyin lefi teres chard l'shalosh me'erev Shabbos yachal arvu mashke l'macha. According to the first shita, you could do it. Little tegen the vasha, but vasha little we could helem arvu matmat. And according to the second shita is us. Okay, so this is as far as I got pshat of this Tosfos, and I'm trying to say that the Alter Rebbe follows this mahalach like the Pri Megadim, not like the Machzis HaShekel, and that's why he brings down over here Tosfos that we do pascha like shittas. The Magen Avraham says we've reiv achreinim halt like Tosfos. Therefore, there's no difference between dvarim shem b'nei gibel and dvarim she'ein b'nei gibel, which means the gibel will be a chiyuv that I say by both. But then when he says the bekula chayav and the sinas ma'im levat, that's another shitta. That's the Sefer HaTruma. That's why always is also to put water. And when we matter the gibel, not like the Trumas Hadeshin said because it's only the Rabbanim, not like the Magid Mishnah said because it's only the Rabbanim because it's Lav B'nei Gibel. The heter is because it's Tzorech Hayom.